movie night. We said before that we had pretty much ran out of New Year's movies to talk about and that we weren't going to talk about Terror Train. And for now, I'm content with sticking with that plan. Maybe I'll rewatch Terror Train one day and say, you know what? I think we could get an episode out of this. But I was hanging out, thinking about Ghostbusters 2, as I'm known to do. And I was like, wait a second. Ghostbusters 2 is a New Year's Eve movie. And immediately was like, yo, we're going to talk about Ghostbusters 2 because when I was a kid, I actually thought that was better than the first Ghostbusters movie, which I still enjoy this movie, but I'm very wrong with that assessment as a child. But I think that there's a lot of fun with Ghostbusters 2, and there's a lot of gooiness in Ghostbusters 2 that the first movie lacks, because it's just like slime everywhere the whole fucking movie.
I am about that life.
But yeah, so I think right out the gate, the movie starts off no context whatsoever, just the words 5 years later, which is so funny. And I don't think it was intended to be funny, but it made me laugh. The first 10 minutes of this movie, I was actually kind of shocked at how much foreshadowing is in the opening sequence, like the first 3 or 4 sequences of this movie, because I'm sure every person listening knows Ghostbusters 2. I don't think this is a new watch for anybody. The slime that's underneath New York City is associated with emotions, and the more angry people are, the more aggressive the slime becomes. So the opening scene, you have Dana pushing her baby carriage, and everyone she's passing is like cliched, pissed off asshole New Yorker fighting with a cop, screaming at this, that, or the other thing. She asks her landlord to just hold bags, and he's like a real dickhole about it. It's just all of these things implying and setting up the world of New York at its most miserable. And then the very next scene, after she has to chase down her baby, she's meeting with Egon, who's talking about how he's studying emotions, and that he's trying to see what the different effects are of negative emotions versus positive emotions. And it is as a kid, I don't think I pieced together how smart that is of it's kind of exposition, but it's not, because it's very it's pushing the plot forward in its placement. I really was my notes kind of stopped for a while because I just got so sucked into enjoying the fun of Ghostbusters 2. Am I alone in this? Were you guys miserable? Was I the only one that
I had an absolute blast watching this. This isn't the best Ghostbusters, obviously, but there's there's nothing in this movie that rubs me the wrong way.
It's not a bad movie.
But I think we have to linger on this for a quick second, because Scott has been very on the record of not liking specifically 80s and early 90s Bill Murray. And this is 80s and 90s Bill Murray at his Bill Murrayest.
But also, I have notes about what he's such. I actually say Venkman is such a prick, and I have a note that says that. But here's the thing: is that there's less of him being I feel like he's less of a character in this than he was in the first one.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. I think that
there's literally less screen time for him, and that's why I think this movie works well for me, because he sucks so fucking hard.
But I think that they leaned into hey, let's also examine the lives of the other 4 guys in the Ghostbusters a little bit more. The highlight of this movie for me, and it's still one of my favorite scenes. Well, Egon's great throughout the whole movie, but the scene where the other 3 Ghostbusters have to go and search the train tracks while Venkman goes on a date, that whole scene in the abandoned train tracks is awesome. It's just a good, well-paced, spooky scene of characters that normally didn't get any screen time away from Bill Murray in the first movie.
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed that scene.
The part with Venkman that I think the introduction of Venkman is the funniest part in the whole of his character, is him hosting this the world of the psychic.
Alien had a room at the Holiday Inn Paramus.
Well, the line that I like is when he just goes, "The world is going to end on midnight on New Year's Eve," and he's like, "This year?" I mean, just from a sales perspective,
Yeah.
that's not a good idea. The best part is him going through that speech, and he's like, you're going to miss out on the movie rights, you're going to miss out on paperbacks, and you see the guy, I think it's Bill Murray's brother actually playing the character, he's like kind of sweating a little bit, and he's like he's doing this brilliant face acting where you can tell that like in his brain he's like realizing that he probably should have picked a different year. It's very funny. It's the whole Vigo the Carpathian.
Vigo. I mean, that fucking guy is hilarious.
He's awesome.
and he's the I can't remember his real name, but he's also the guy in Dragon Slayer, which is a great high fantasy film.
I loved a lot of his movies too. Dracula Dead and Loving It, and Bean.
But he also has some of the coolest, like, he's got a lot of really cool scare scenes in this. Like,
when his eyes glow, yeah.
Oh my god, the headlight eyes is so cool. When he's dressed as the, like, gnarly-ass nanny and his arm shoots out to grab the baby, there's some this movie has some really, really cool scenes. And I think that it goes a lot darker than the first movie did in a lot of ways. Like, again, that train sequence, like, the first Ghostbusters movie wouldn't have decapitated heads on pikes. Like, that's definitely like, hey, we can do whatever we want with the second film. I've always loved, when I was a kid, my favorite scene is that scene in the bathtub, though, where the tub fills with that slime and the whole, like, it's like a giant puppet. Like, that's insane.
That's the one thing that I'll say, and it's not even a diss, but I remember that being way gnarlier when I was a kid. Like, it's pretty tame now, but what's really weird about it is that that's the scene that I remember more than anything from that, and when they're dropping Dan Aykroyd's character
Ray into
the sewer, and then he's like, pull me up, because like the things the tendrils are coming after him.
Yeah,
those two scenes were what stuck in my mind from being a kid. Not the heads on pikes scene. Yeah. I don't know how I wasn't destroyed by that shit, and I think it was because I blocked it out.
the scene where Ray's dangling like a couple 100 feet above this giant puddle of slime. That scene where they're all playing the role of dumb construction workers in New York.
Yeah, that is Egon's best scene too.
He's so because I think I never realized, like, his character is absolutely so socially inept in scenes and like can't think on his feet. So I love how panicked he is whenever they throw to him to say anything and he just gets like one word in. We skipped my favorite Egon moment.
My parents didn't believe in toys?
No, that is a great scene, but it's in the very beginning when Dana comes to talk to him and she's like, he's talking about how he's studying the reactions of like sadness and joy on people. And then she like says, well, look, you and Ray can work on this, but I don't want Peter involved. And he's like, no, obviously. And then she goes, does he ever mention me? And he goes, no. And then when she turns around, he like slowly scans her to read the emotions. It is so good. It's such a good background joke. So it was him dangling from the ceiling in the bathtub. For me, the two scenes that have always stuck with me is the bathtub scene and the court case. The court case scene with the Scoleri brothers is so fucking good.
Scoleri brothers.
Like, well, I mean, Rick Moranis as like the worst lawyer on the planet is so
Rick Moranis in this is my second favorite Rick Moranis, you know? Like, obviously number one is Little Shop, and then Ghostbusters 2 is my other favorite.
When Peter Venkman's on the bench and he's just muttering nonsense and Rick Moranis is just talking over top of it. He's just like,
he's like trying to tell him what to say.
Yes. Objection, leading the witness. Leave me alone. We're both lawyers. It's like his opening line is, once I got turned into a dog and they saved me. Thank you, Your Honor.
And also we get him saying Annie Potts, who I have like 1 degree of separation from, and I will tell you about that in a second here. But when Annie is like, I'm gonna go watch the baby tonight, you should come over. He's like, well, I don't have his address. Well, I guess I can get his address from his W-2. I don't know why, but that killed me so fucking hard. I never caught that until this watch.
What the hell did he say? He like completely massacres a legal term when he's trying to get the court case thrown out, and he's like, yeah, you put a distraining order on him, or whatever that blue slip was she handed to me. He crushes it in this movie. Annie Potts has the one line where she's like, I'd like to have a baby sometime, and he goes, tonight?
Oh my God. Their chemistry in this is so fucking good. Like it went way over my head as a kid. Like I knew that they were like sexy time, but like so fucking funny. And so here's the story about Annie Potts. So Megan worked at a very prestigious camp in the Sierra Nevadas in California, and basically all of the kids that came, all the campers, were rich kids people. Or rich people's kids, sorry. And so Annie Potts' son went there, and so she's kept in contact with them. I mean, not like friends, but she could be like, we're in California. We could literally call him up and be like, hey, can my husband meet Annie Potts? I would take her up on that shit. I would love to meet Annie Potts, just to be like, hey, it's Annie Potts. Like we were talking about a while back, where it's not like I would fawn over her. It's just be like, fucking cool little feather in your cap, like, hey, it's Annie Potts, I just had lunch with Annie Potts. But the other thing that like I love about Ghostbusters 2 that we really haven't talked about yet, but I was bitching about last week in Krampus, is the pacing. The pacing in this movie is so good. I think it's better than the Ghostbusters 1 pacing, because we get Vigo and the River of Slime by the 22-minute mark. I actually wrote down the timestamp because I was like, God damn, it's faster than I remember it being.
Yeah, no, it moves. And I just looked up the quotes because I wanted to get Lewis's full opening statement to the court, as he says, Your Honor and ladies and gentlemen of the audience, I don't think it's fair to call my clients frauds. Sure, the blackout was a big problem for everybody. I was trapped in an elevator for 2 hours and I had to make the whole time. But I don't blame them, because one time I turned into a dog and they helped me. Thank you. And I can't help but have to wonder when he says, I was trapped in an elevator for 2 hours and I had to make the whole time, if that's supposed to be like him saying like I had to pass the time, or is he saying that he had to take a shit the whole time?
He had to pee.
That's so fucking funny. I didn't realize as I was reading until I read that he was saying that he had to.
Who has ever said make as in pass the time?
I don't know.
Well, hey, Brian, I hope you know what movie we're watching next week. It's the one that Matt picked, and everybody talks like this in it.
Yeah, see? Yeah, I mean, the movie is just, I agree with you. The pacing in this movie is so much fun. I feel like they really, a lot of the things that the critics had against this movie was they were like, it's a total rehash of the first movie. But I disagree. And I've talked about before why Dream Warriors is kind of looked at as like one of the ultimate sequels, and why movies like Freddy's Revenge didn't really catch on right away, is that when people go to see a sequel, there's two things they don't want. One thing is that they don't want it to be a completely like out of left field change of what they're used to, but they also don't want to literally just see a carbon copy of the movie that they liked. But if you can take all of the elements that they liked and elevate it and just twist it a little bit, then you can make a really good sequel. And I feel like that's like Dream Warriors is taking everything that works in the original movie and elevating it just a little bit. And I think that Ghostbusters 2 does the same thing. It takes all of the beats of the first film, but it elevates it and amps it up and like throws more budget into special effects, throws more budget into like, hey, let's have some really cool, like really gnarly looking ghosts. Like the Scoleri brothers look fucking awesome. They look so cool. And then I like that we find them kind of down and out. Like I love Ray and Winston having to like go deal with a bunch of shitty kids at a party at the beginning of this movie, because they're just He-Man. I've said this before, but this soundtrack is also pretty damn good, because you got the Run DMC remix of the Ghostbusters theme, and you've got that Bobby Brown song, which is so fucking good. Oh, man.
I had it on tape, dude. I listened to this incessantly.
Dude, that Bobby... And Chris Fafios has brought that song up at least 3 times on One Hit Thunder, because he's like, I want to get on a soundtrack where my job is to write a 30-second rap that sums up the entire plot of a movie in the middle of a dance song. I think that the high point in both Ghostbusters movies is the New York under siege with ghosts montage scenes.
Always.
So like you know,
So
in the first one,
goddamn
you've
good.
got that awesome scene where it's like Slimer pops out eating the hot dogs, and you've got the skeleton cab driver.
Skeleton cab drivers.
Like, oh, it's so good. And then this one, you've got the two big ones are the fur coat coming to life.
Oh, that's so good.
It's so good. It looks so good. It's like such a good gag. And then the Titanic arrive. Like, and it's Cheech for some reason as one of the dock workers, but like
So weird.
It was better late than never, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, oh, it's so good.
Just nothing to do with Ghostbusters. I just really want to tell you this. I thought Uncle John's friend wrote the Ghostbusters song, like one of Uncle John's close friends, and he didn't, but he did write "Rock Till You Drop" for Monster Squad.
Oh wait, what do you mean that's one of wait?
Mike
Sembello?
Yeah, Mike Sembello is like from Ardmore. He's like he knows Uncle John really well.
Fucking what?
What? So wait, so Scott's over here bragging about being 1 degree of separation from Annie Potts through his wife, and we're 1 degree of separation from the dude who wrote fucking Maniac and Rockin' Till You Drop and the Monster Squad rap by an uncle?
Yeah, the Sembello.
And you're how many days old are you knowing that this
is insane. I'm going to yell at Uncle John next time I see him. He knows I'm in a Monster Squad documentary. This should have came up by now.
Yeah, and also maybe then we could have had my cover of Rockin' Till You Drop in the Monster Squad documentary.
Son of a bitch. That's so funny. That's
you have
crazy.
failed me for the last time.
So I worked with this guy Lenny who grew up with my mom, but he knew my Uncle John really well. And then one day he was like, yeah, John's a great guy. And, you know, our good friend Mike, you know, Mike Sembello. And I was like, yeah, when I didn't.
And then Matt and I are fucking shitting our pants right now.
Yeah, and the only reason that I've remembered it this many years later with all the drugs is because from that point on, every time Lenny saw me, he'd go, Mike Sembello, great guy. And I go, oh, yeah, he was. Oh, was he?
So I wrote down my last note is it just says, I like that this movie's thesis is that even Motown cannot be resisted by an evil slime. Because I agree. If you don't smile when you hear a Motown song, I don't need you in my life. That is like the most feel-good, happy music on the planet. And also, you know, we were talking about a lot of the spooky scenes that happen in this movie, like the heads on the spikes and the Winston like voice, and there's a lot of good scares, but honestly, Ray with Vigo's head on his body was like always really unsettling to me.
Oh yeah, I hate that effect. It's like it's a really good mask.
Yeah, this movie is, I'm almost, we've talked about, like, fuck the critics before, but, like, it is a bummer that this movie kind of was shit on, and, like, I know that at least half of the cast didn't enjoy doing this one, but, man, I love it. I love this movie so much, and, like, I really do, I look back at, like, the Ghostbusters movies in general, and can't help but think, like, what a crazy idea. Like what an insane idea.
Cocaine.
Cocaine for sure, but like what an insane idea of like, let's do a horror movie about guys who fight ghosts, but let's get the like biggest names in 80s sketch comedy to write and star in it and then see what the combination comes out as. Like, it's such a risky move. And then you think about like the original cast was going to be, I think John Belushi was originally supposed to play Bill Murray's role. And I think Eddie Murphy was originally supposed to play the Winston role, like when they first were making it. And it's just like
that wouldn't have worked. Winston has to be the straight man.
He has to be the straight man, and he has to be like it. I think it works that Winston wasn't the big established name that everybody else was, because he also has to be. And they said this. They made the change because they were like, in the original script, like, Winston was always a member of the Ghostbusters, and they changed it because they're like, he needs to be the audience. He needs to represent the audience stepping into this world who can ask the scientific questions that the three scientists already know the answers to. Otherwise, there's no reason for them to ever explain the science. It's insane because today I was having a really in-depth conversation with Robert Bacon about the art of comedy, and we were talking about the 80s comedies from like Doug Kinney and Harold Ramis and stuff, and how those movies, they really show the art form of like, there is an intellect to writing a good comedy. And we were talking about like we talked about both Ghostbusters and Groundhog's Day, and how in both of those movies, it can be 10 to 15 minutes before the first true joke comes into the movie, because they do what you're supposed to do in comedy, which is like build the world, build the characters, let us know who everybody is, and then let us laugh at who they are and their personalities. You let it slowly build organically by like a place of truth. I got 2 double features, so I'll let you 2 go first, because I think one of you will take one of them, but not the other.
Nothing But Trouble, starring Dan Aykroyd.
You haven't even seen Nothing But Trouble, starring Dan Aykroyd.
I know, neither. All right, I'll pair it with something else I haven't seen, but I always talk about, 9 Lives with Kevin Spacey.
All right, Scott, how about you take what I think is the most glaring obvious one?
Oh, Blob 88.
Yeah. Okay, that was one of mine. The other one that I had written down, there was a scene where they're walking through the abandoned train tracks, and Dan Aykroyd just keeps making comments about how like he's heard of these giant killer rats down there. And I was like, man, I want to watch Graveyard Shift right now.
Oh.
So, I mean, there's really nothing else that connects the two except for that one line. But, I don't know, I could watch some Graveyard Shift. I'd like to see the Graveyard Shift movie where the Ghostbusters come and solve the problem for the mill. And finally, everyone's favorite segment of the show, what did we watch this week? Brian, since you went first with your double feature, anything else that you watched?
Big Mouth.
It's good.
I'm almost done. Yeah.
It's good.
I like it.
So,
I don't like it as much.
Do you feel like after I finished watching it, in retrospect, I feel like the first 3 episodes could have just been a Big Mouth movie? Feels kind of like it bridges where season 3 ended and season 4 begins, but it also feels like its own standalone story, separated from the rest of the season.
Yeah, like that was good. I'm not done the season yet. It's just, I think Nick Kroll got scared because he got like crucified by Twitter last year, and like is trying too hard now when like what he was doing. Now, I don't know. It's so hard for me to really put my opinion on it. You know, I'm like trying my best to tiptoe around it, but it's just like, you have to understand that Twitter isn't always people with like good intentions. It can sometimes just be
90% of the time it's not.
Yeah, it could just be people that just like want to complain.
I'll ask a very open-ended question. Did you get to the crossover episode?
Yes, that was funny.
That was amazing. Crossover. Yeah, they did a Pen 15 crossover where Maya and Annie.
That episode, they were making a statement, and it worked so well because it wasn't like. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's a good season. It's not the first season's incredible, but yeah, I really, the first 3 episodes though I think are fantastic. How about you, Scott?
Oh fuck. Hey, well, I had a quick question for you guys. Do you remember that Ghostbusters toy where it was the Ghostbusters trap and it was like hydraulic? You could stomp on the.
Yes.
Did you guys have one?
Yes,
we did.
Oh, I wish I might go on eBay and try and find one.
We could go on tangents for days, and we've done it before, just about how incredible the Ghostbusters toys action line was. Like, just hundreds and hundreds of incredible creative toys.
Yeah. So did you ever see the movie where all the WWF wrestlers live in the Ghostbusters firehouse?
No, and I, of all people, should have seen that.
It was written and directed by 6-year-old me, and it was never filmed. But that.
Oh, I'm sitting next to that house right now, actually, where it was filmed.
Yeah. Well, so I have
where I spent all my time.
I do have 2 movies that I want to mention. I have 2 movies that I think Brian would actually really like. The first one is called 1BR, One Bedroom, and it is a cult movie.
I heard about it, and we watched the trailer, and I'm like, that's either going to be really good or really bad, and I don't feel like finding out, so I'm glad that you saw it first.
Yep, I liked it a lot. I thought that it was really, it'll be up your alley. I think that you should give it a shot. And the other movie that I think you will really love is The Wolf of Snow Hollow. Have you heard about it?
I see the cover every day because the cover looks so cool because it's literally just like a red like just a red cover with like gothic writing.
Yep.
But I have not watched it.
And that's one that a bunch of friends, even people who aren't horror fans, have messaged me and told me that I would really like that movie too.
Oh,
you guys should both watch it. Let me tell you, I think you guys would both like it for different reasons. Brian will love it for what it is, and I think that Matt will love it because of the characterizations.
Okay.
So, I mean, like the main character, the police chief, the young police chief, Matt, you will absolutely love the way he acts, and you will love his story arc. It's very funny, but also kind of depressing. It's kind of almost got a dramedy thing going on. It's an hour and 40, which I thought that was going to be excessively long, but it worked out perfectly. It is not a high action movie, and I'm not telling you guys anything about either movie more than I absolutely had to, because I think you should both watch them. I think they're both really good movies. They're not necessarily movies that I would rewatch because they're not Gretel and Hansel or Underwater or Color Out of Space or Blood Vessel. You know, those are the movies that I'm watching, like, or Babysitter, Killer Queen. Those are the movies that I'm watching from 2020 in 2021. But I think that you guys would both really appreciate 1BR and Wolf of Snow Hollow.
Okay,
Nice.
awesome.
And my last one's kind of short because I don't have too much to say about it, but I saw that Shudder had the movie Patrick, and I remembered it from Not Quite Hollywood, the documentary about Ozzysploitation, and it's actually a decent movie, but I would never pick it for the show because it's just way too long. It's almost 2 hours long.
Ugh.
And the premise is fun. It's you know, dude in a coma who's killing people with his brain power.
Oh, that movie, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like the poster's just his eyeballs staring with the word Patrick above it. The thing with Ozzysploitation films, and we kind of dipped into this a little bit with Howling 3, but as I've watched more and more of these movies, like they are very interestingly shot because they're definitely, they've got that scrappy go get 'em attitude, but you know, if I was to make a movie, I would play it safe because I'd be really worried that, like, I needed the movie to be watchable. So, like, camera shots would be very static, say. But, like, I don't know what was going on where they just didn't give a fuck and they were just, like, throwing cameras left and right and doing all types of crazy camera shots and angles. And, like, the camera just feels like it's always moving when you're watching those movies. So, like, from that standpoint, it's worth watching at least once just to, like, look at the cinematography in it. That is the end of 2020. You know, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that, you know, when in 3 days the world is going to normalize because it's suddenly 2022 or 2021. But, you know, here's hoping for a better year. I think, personally, just speaking for myself, but I think I speak for the other two guys here, that as much as a shit show as this year was, I do look back at it fondly. I think that Horror Movie Night as a show has done a lot of really cool, incredible things. You know, we did our 15-hour live stream. We did another live stream with Geekscape as well. And I think that this was one of our best years just pure content-wise. So, you know, doesn't make up for all of the bad things that happened in 2020. But from a personal standpoint, I think I'm proud of us. I think that we stepped up and really took it. No one would have blamed us if we had said, you know what, let's just take a break and you know, let the world do its thing. But we decided to do what I think is a much more difficult option of trying to be funny and upbeat and optimistic in the worst of times. And, you know, sometimes we succeeded, sometimes we didn't, but I'm really proud of what we did. And I hope Scott and Brian are as well.
Well, this is an escape for me. So, I mean, like, I love watching horror movies and then joking with you guys about them. It makes me forget about the existential terror of living during this time. So I think that that's what our listeners come to us for as well. And we're going to keep that going in 2021, guys. No matter how much better it gets, we're still going to be the fantasy. We'll be your fantasy in 2021.
And I like not having to hug people goodbye anymore.
All right, that was Horror Movie Night signing off for 2020. We'll see you next year.
listening to the Geekscape Network. You're listening to the Geekscape Network.